Welcome into another edition of the GigEm247 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Carter Karels, and we are also joined by Michael Burwell from the Toledo Blade. Texas A&M returns to Kyle Field this weekend to host Bowling Green at 6:30 on Saturday night. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Quite the couple weeks. Obviously, we were talking before the show about a trip to Happy Valley a couple weeks ago, and Bowling Green took a 24-20 lead into the halftime, I believe. We're talking about how folks around Penn State were getting a little nervous in that setting. What impressed you about that performance and that game?
Yeah, Bowling Green was just extremely prepared for that game, especially offensively. I mean, they moved the ball at will in the first half against one of the best defensive teams. Obviously Penn State led the country in defense last year. Bowling Green just marched down the field almost every single possession. Uh, just looked really impressive, and they're doing so without their star running back, Terrion Stewart, who missed the game with an ankle injury. So the fact that they did that well offensively without probably their best, your top one or two offensive threats really was impressive.
Yeah, Michael, you look at the last 4 years for Bowling Green, and it's been improvement every season. From that winless season in 2020, every year the win total's been higher. I'm just wondering what's kind of contributed to that improvement, and what's gotten to them to this place where, hey, they can compete with Penn State, and hey, maybe they could, win their conference this year.
Right. Yeah, it's been a pretty slow but steady rebuild under their head coach, Scott Leffler, who is in his sixth season this year. When he took over in 2019, I mean, the program had a couple really, really bad years beforehand. So he really kind of had to start from the bottom up. I mean, even when it comes to everything, trying to get the right players, establishing, just some sort of culture within the program, and just very slowly, they pick up some big wins, over the years. They beat Minnesota in 2021, which was huge for the program. um, you know Made it to a bowl game the last couple years. That's been good as well, for the first time in close to a decade. So it's just a combination of just developing talent, bringing in the right players, and the transfer portal for sure. They've brought in some really, really key players from the transfer portal. Especially at like the skill positions offensively, like quarterback and wide receiver. That's just kind of a combination of just establishing an identity, and the culture has really helped them get to this point.
Michael, you look at this team, and obviously it's a really experienced team, 32 seniors, a sixth-year quarterback. How do you see that, plus their experience playing in loud environments over the last couple of years, kind of impacting this game?
Yeah, they're basically everyone on the roster has played in big environments, and I'll tell you what, they're not afraid of it. They prepare really well during the week, to get ready for these types of environments. Against Penn State, in the first half, they had one penalty for 5 yards, and I think it was a false start penalty. Just really effective. Basically took the crowd out of it. Second half was a little bit different. Penn State got made a comeback. They took the lead. BG had to use a couple timeouts, and basically because the crowd was getting pretty loud.
Yeah.
But against Michigan last year, BG played Michigan tough in the first half, and they weren't phased. That was a night game as well. They weren't phased by that. It's just all those players. A lot of those players, they know the offense, they know the system, they know the defense. They're 2, 3, 4 year college football players. I mean, throughout BG's lineup, basically every single position that they have is full of players who have played just a ton of college football. So they really embrace these big games, and they're not afraid of the environment.
There are a ton of connections to really between these two schools going into this game. Been, part of the conversation this week. Mike Elko obviously was the DC back in the day at Bowling Green, really helped launch his career. Sean Spencer, Coach Chaos, the D-line coach at A&M, was with him during part of that time. Derek Miller was the general manager at Bowling Green back in 2020, and then obviously Cassius Howell coming from Bowling Green last year through the transfer portal to A&M. Maybe you could touch on a few of those, but in particular, Michael Howell made a really big impact so far at A&M. Led the MAC in sacks last year. It was kind of a guy, it seemed like, redshirted and took him a couple years before he became who he became. But I'm wondering just what you saw led to his development and just how special of a player he was for the Falcons.
Yeah, last year was obviously quite a season for him, and he's just so talented on the edge. To get 9.5 sacks last year, I think it was in the top 20 nationally. He just lived in the backfield, and BG did a great job, getting to the quarterback, especially the second half of last year. And Howell was a huge part of that. Obviously for his size, was just so quick on the edge, and Bowling Green, obviously, he transfers to Texas A&M. Obviously, this is kind of an emotional game in that regard, but there's no hard feelings or animosity or anything like that with Howell leaving. They're happy for him. BG head coach Scott Leffler, mentioned in the press conference earlier this week, he still loves him, loves his family. He's proud of him to see him do well. At the next stage, at Texas A&M. So he's just a really, really talented player and just has a knack for finding a way to get to the quarterback.
If you listen to this on the podcast, we're joined by Michael Burwell from the Toledo Blade. Going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Michael. If you listen to us on video, hang with us. We'll be right back after a quick break. Michael, we're joined by Michael Burwell from the Toledo Blade. Got to ask you about Conor Bazelak, because it feels like kind of a luxury having a guy like that in a game, going into this setting. Played at Missouri, played at Indiana, so plenty of Power 4 experience, plenty of experience playing in environments like this. What has he brought to Bowling Green's offense, maybe from that experience standpoint and just in general?
Yeah, I think especially lately, he just kind of brings just a calming presence to that offense. When he came to Bowling Green, it was a really, really rough start for him. He had a horrible first game. He threw 3 interceptions against Liberty in a loss. Had 5 interceptions in his first 3 games, but since then, all he needs to do is just manage the game. Don't turn the ball over. Don't make any negative plays. And pretty much for the most part, he's done that in the last 8 or 9 games or so, including the first couple this year. They don't need him to throw for, 350 yards and 6 touchdowns every game. They just need him to manage the game. Don't turn the ball over. They have a really good running game as well. So I think he's just kind of that calming presence. He's brought that to the team in these big games, especially, and just that veteran presence. The whole team is loaded with veterans, but obviously when you spend as much time in college football as he has, there's just a lot of expertise, a lot of experience with that. So he's just been really solid for them since he arrived.
Michael, maybe the biggest weakness so far for Bowling Green has been its run defense, maybe its defense altogether. But, looking at A&M and what they've been able to do running the football, certainly going to be a talking point going into this game. And wondering, just through your assessment, what's been the biggest issues for them against the run, and what will be kind of the key for them in this game?
Yeah, maybe a little surprising that they've struggled in run defense. They did outstanding last year, the best under head coach Scott Loeffler. Um, but also, you got to give credit to the running backs that they've faced. Penn State has two outstanding junior backs who have had a great career so far. They both rushed for 100 yards, had some big plays, especially late against Bowling Green. And the week before, BG beat Fordham, an FCS school, pretty handily. Their running back, Fordham's running back, Julius Luffridge, is one of the best FCS backs out there, and he ran for 100 yards. So maybe it's kind of a little bit surprising. I think it's just they've gone up against talented backs. I think that's definitely part of it. Their PG's offensive or defensive line is, I mean, they're all back from last year, very experienced, but they did lose a couple pretty important pieces at the linebacker position. Obviously Howell went to Texas A&M. They had another linebacker graduate, Darren Anders. He was huge along that linebacker core. Another one is Demetrius Hardiman. He had a scary injury against Michigan last year, cost him the rest of the season. They're expecting him to be back, but he's missed the first couple games. So maybe a little bit of inexperience at the linebacker position has contributed to that. But they're I mean, to have any chance in this game, they're going to have to find a way to at least contain or try to slow down a little bit A&M's run game.
Yeah, looking at some of those keys, Michael, what do you feel like Bowling Green kind of needs to do, and what are some of the keys for them heading into this game?
Yeah, defensively, they've got to force some turnovers. That's how they stayed in the game against Michigan last year. They picked off J.J. McCarthy 3 times, forced 4 turnovers overall. So that's kind of how they stayed close in that first half. So they intercepted Penn State quarterback Drew Aller a couple weeks ago. I think that was only his 3rd career interception. So forcing turnovers is going to be huge. And then offensively, I think they just got to score it well. They got to find a way to just continue to rack on the points. They did that against Penn State, especially in the first half, and then just kind of faltered in the second half. I mean, I think if BG wants to win this, I think it's going to have to be a shootout, and they're going to have to find a way to put up, 35, 40 points to have a chance.
Michael, just looking at the season ahead for Bowling Green, can't get much tougher than this 2-game stretch, Penn State and Texas A&M. Northern Illinois, probably a bigger challenge than anticipated going into the year. But just curious, I think Bowling Green was projected to be 3rd in the MAC, but where do you see them now after seeing for a couple games? How do you feel like the rest of the season might play out for them?
Yeah, their MAC schedule is definitely tough. They were picked to finish, I think it was tied for 3rd with Northern Illinois. They also have Miami of Ohio, which was picked to finish 1st, and Toledo, a huge rival for them. They were picked to finish 2nd. So they face basically the other top 3 teams. And after seeing these first couple games, I mean, I still think BG is right up there to get a chance at, earning a MAC championship game berth and potentially winning it. Obviously, Northern Illinois they stunned the country and beat Notre Dame. Toledo just beat Mississippi State on Saturday, and that wasn't even close. It was a beatdown at Mississippi State. So the MAC has been it's been pretty tough, to say the least. So I mean, BG, they have their hands full. Playing these games, like a Penn State and Texas A&M, definitely will help them out. If at least trying to be able to compete against these high caliber teams. But once league play starts, I mean, those top 4 teams are outstanding. So they definitely have a good chance of winning the MAC, but they're gonna have to stay healthy. That's number one. But they definitely have a shot at winning the MAC.
Tremendous insight from Michael. Thank you so much for joining us. And there's a great Q&A over on the GigEm247 site. GigEm247 site from Michael. So I encourage you guys to check that out as well. Michael, thanks for all the background and the insight into Bowling Green and for joining us today.
Yep, no problem. Thanks again for having me.
Yep, absolutely. Enjoy the trip down to College Station. And to those listening, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next week as A&M starts to ramp up for another round of SEC play against Arkansas in AT&T Stadium. Until then, we'll see you guys soon. Thanks a lot.